Take it off. The sharp voice cut through the grand ballroom like a knife. Every conversation stopped. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above Seoul's most powerful families as hundreds of wealthy guests turned toward a single young black woman. Amara Hayes froze. Her fingers instinctively wrapped around the silver necklace resting against her chest. The elegantly dressed woman stepped closer. "I said take it off. That necklace doesn't belong on someone like you." A ripple of whispers spread through the room. Amara swallowed the lump in her throat. "It was a gift," she said quietly. "I was told I could wear it." The woman let out a mocking laugh. "A maid? Wearing Kwan family jewelry?" She turned toward security. "Escort her out." Amara looked around the ballroom. Not one person stood up for her. She didn't want to cause trouble. Slowly, she reached behind her neck. Her trembling fingers unclasped the necklace. Just as she was about to remove it, a deep voice echoed across the silent ballroom. "Stop." The room instantly fell silent. The grand entrance doors opened. Every guest straightened. Every conversation died. Kwon Ji-han had arrived. The feared head of the Kwon family walked calmly through the crowd, his perfectly tailored black suit untouched by the rain outside. 28 years old, tall, broad-shouldered, exceptionally handsome. His expression revealed nothing. Without saying another word, he stopped directly in front of Amara. She lowered her eyes, too embarrassed to look at him. He gently took the necklace from her trembling hands. For a long moment, he simply looked at it. Then he carefully fastened it back around her neck himself. The ballroom watched in stunned silence. The woman who had humiliated Amara finally spoke. "Chairman Kwon, she has no right to wear that." Jihan slowly turned his head. "Who decided that?" No one answered. He slipped one hand inside his suit jacket. When he pulled it back out, he was holding a small black velvet box. The moment it opened, several family elders stood up in shock. Inside rested the Kwon family ring, a ring no outsider had ever touched. Jihan looked directly into Amara's tear-filled eyes. Without asking permission, he gently took her hand. Then, he slid the family ring onto her finger. Gasps echoed throughout the ballroom. The silence became unbearable. Only then did Kwon Ji-han finally speak. Now, he looked around the room. "If anyone still has a problem with what she's wearing," his voice remained calm, "they can take it up with me." 2 weeks before the banquet, Amara Hayes stood outside a glass office building with a cardboard box in her hands. Inside the box were everything she had left from the job she had dreamed about for years. A sketchbook, a framed photograph of her late parents, a coffee mug that read, "Design changes lives." The architecture firm where she had worked had declared bankruptcy that morning. Without warning, without severance pay, without another chance. At just 24 years old, the future she had crossed an ocean to build had disappeared before her eyes. 3 months earlier, Amara had left London believing Seoul would become her new beginning. Instead, it became the loneliest city she had ever known. Every interview ended the same way. "We'll let you know." Nobody ever did. Her savings disappeared one bill at a time. Rent was due in 5 days. Hope began to feel expensive. That evening, her closest friend, Hannah, noticed the sadness in her voice. "There may be one opportunity." Amara forced a smile. "I'll take anything. It isn't architecture. I don't care." Hannah hesitated before continuing. "It's a live-in caregiver position." Amara looked out the apartment window. She had spent years studying architecture. Now life was asking her to start over. Quietly, she smiled. "Send me the address." The Kwon estate stood behind towering black iron gates, overlooking the hills outside Seoul. The mansion looked less like a family home, and more like a private palace. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway. Uniformed security guards stood watch at every entrance. Everything about the estate spoke of power. Mrs. Choi, the family's longtime housekeeper, welcomed Amara inside. As they walked through the silent marble halls, she explained why no caregiver ever stayed. Madame Kwon had become distant after losing her husband several years earlier. She rarely spoke. She refused company. 6 caregivers had already left. Most lasted less than a week. Amara listened quietly. She had learned long ago that lonely people often built walls long before anyone noticed they were hurting. When they reached Madame Kwan's room, Mrs. Choi knocked softly. No answer. She opened the door anyway. The elderly woman sat beside a large window overlooking the estate. An unfinished jigsaw puzzle rested on the table beside her. She never turned around. Mrs. Choi quietly excused herself, leaving Amara alone. For several moments, the room remained completely silent. Instead of introducing herself, Amara noticed a missing puzzle piece lying beneath the chair. She picked it up, walked over, and gently placed it where it belonged. The tiny click echoed through the room. Then, Madame Kwan turned. Their eyes met. "You found it." Amara smiled. "I think it was waiting for someone to notice." A long silence followed. Then Madame Kwan slowly pointed toward the empty chair beside her. "Sit." It was the first conversation she had willingly started with anyone in months. Days passed. Then another week. The atmosphere inside the mansion slowly changed. Madame Kwan began eating her meals again. She walked through the gardens every afternoon. Sometimes she and Amara talked. Sometimes they simply enjoyed the quiet together. The servants noticed the difference. So did Mrs. Choi. For the first time in years, the estate no longer felt empty. Far across Seoul, Kwon Ji-han remained completely unaware. At 28, he carried the weight of one of Korea's most powerful families on his shoulders. His days were consumed by business meetings, negotiations, and responsibilities that never seemed to end. He rarely returned to the estate before midnight. The mansion had become little more than a place to sleep. One evening, Mrs. Choi finally called him. She spoke only a few sentences. Madame Kwan was eating again. She was laughing again. And somehow, the new caregiver had accomplished what no one else could. Jihan listened quietly. Before ending the call, he asked only one question. Her name? Amara Hayes. He thanked Mrs. Choi and ended the call. The name meant nothing to him, or so he thought. Several days later, Jihan returned home earlier than usual. As he walked past the library, soft laughter drifted into the hallway. He stopped. The sound was unfamiliar. Carefully, he looked inside. Madame Kwan was smiling. Across from her sat a young woman laughing over a game of cards. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't asking for anything. She simply looked comfortable. Jihan watched for only a few seconds, then quietly continued walking. Neither woman realized he had been there. The following evening, Madame Kwan invited Amara to join her at the family's annual banquet. Amara immediately refused. She wasn't family. She didn't belong among Seoul's elite. Madame Kwan simply smiled. You belong wherever kindness is welcomed. She opened a velvet jewelry box resting on the table. Inside lay an elegant silver necklace. Simple, timeless, beautiful. It was my favorite. Before Amara could protest, Madame Kwan gently fastened the necklace around her neck herself. I want you to wear it. Amara looked at her reflection. She had no idea that wearing one simple necklace was about to change her life forever. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us create more cinematic stories like this every week. Now, let's get back to the Kwan family, because the biggest twist is still ahead. The annual Kwan family banquet was the most exclusive invitation in Seoul. Business tycoons, political leaders, celebrities, foreign diplomats, even rival Mafia families sent representatives. Every guest understood one thing. Inside the Kwan estate, power mattered more than wealth. Amara had never attended an event like it. She stood quietly beside Madame Kwan, careful to remain in the background. The elegant silver necklace rested around her neck. She still felt uncomfortable wearing it. Several guests greeted Madame Kwan with respectful bows. Some glanced curiously at Amara. Others barely acknowledged her existence. She preferred it that way. Then Madame Kwan was called away by several family elders. Before leaving, she smiled warmly. I'll only be a moment. Amara nodded. I'll be right here. She slowly wandered toward one of the marble columns overlooking the ballroom. It was quieter there, or so she thought. A woman dressed in an expensive emerald evening gown approached her. Elegant, confident, beautiful. Yoon So-ah, the daughter of one of Korea's most influential mafia families. For years, everyone believed she would become Kwon Ji-han's future wife. Her eyes settled immediately on the necklace. Her smile disappeared. Take it off. The words sliced through the music. Nearby conversations faded. Amara blinked. I'm sorry? I said, take it off. That necklace doesn't belong on someone like you. Guests slowly turned toward them. The ballroom became quieter with every passing second. Amara instinctively touched the necklace. It was a gift. Seo Iso-ah let out a quiet laugh. A gift? From the Kwon family? She slowly circled Amara. You expect everyone here to believe that? Several guests exchanged amused glances. Others simply watched. No one interrupted. Seo-ah folded her arms. You work here. Know your place. The words hit harder than Amara expected. She looked around the ballroom. Not one person defended her. Not one. She didn't want to embarrass Madame Kwon, or create a scene. Slowly, she reached behind her neck. Her trembling fingers unclasped the necklace. Just as she was about to remove it, a calm voice echoed across the ballroom. Stop! The music stopped. The room fell completely silent. The grand entrance doors opened. Every guest instinctively stepped aside. Kwon Ji-han had arrived. 28 years old, tall, broad-shouldered, exceptionally handsome. His perfectly tailored black suit reflected the quiet authority that surrounded him. He walked through the crowd without hurrying, without looking at anyone else, until he stopped in front of Amara. She lowered her eyes, too embarrassed to meet his gaze. Ji-han gently took the necklace from her trembling hands. For several long seconds, he simply looked at it. Then, he carefully fastened it back around her neck. Zio finally found her voice. Chairman Kwon, she has no right to wear that. Ji-han slowly turned toward her. Who decided that? No one answered. The silence became suffocating. Ji-han slipped one hand inside his jacket. When he pulled it back out, he was holding a small black velvet box. The moment it opened, several family elders immediately stood. Inside rested the legendary Kwon family ring, a ring reserved only for the woman chosen to stand beside the head of the Kwon family. Even Seo-ah's face turned pale. Ji-han looked directly into Amara's eyes. Without saying another word, he gently took her left hand. Then, he slipped the Kwon family ring onto her finger. Gasps echoed throughout the ballroom. Time itself seemed to stop. Ji-han finally broke the silence. If anyone still has a problem with what she's wearing, his eyes swept across the room. They can take it up with me. Not a single person spoke. He offered Amara his arm. Come. She stared at him in complete disbelief. You don't have to understand. For reasons she couldn't explain. She placed her hand on his arm. Together, they walked through the silent ballroom. Hundreds of eyes followed them. No one dared stand in their way. The moment the mansion doors closed behind them, the ballroom erupted. Guests demanded answers. Family elders argued. Reporters waiting outside began flooding social media with photographs that would dominate every headline before sunrise. Only two people remained silent. Amara, who couldn't understand why the most feared man in South Korea had chosen her, and Kwon Ji-han, who had no intention of explaining himself. By sunrise, the entire country was talking about one woman. Every major news outlet carried the same headline. Who is the mystery woman wearing the Kwon family ring? Photographs of Ji-han slipping the ring onto Amara's finger flooded television, newspapers, and social media. Within hours, thousands had already judged her. Some called her a gold digger. Others claimed she had trapped the most powerful man in South Korea. No one knew her story, yet everyone had an opinion. Inside Kwon Group headquarters, reporters crowded the main entrance. Questions echoed through the lobby. Chairman Kwon, is she your fiancé? Who is Amara Hayes? Jihan walked past every microphone without slowing down, without answering a single question. His silence only made the mystery bigger. At the Kwan estate, the family elders demanded an emergency meeting. One by one, they insisted Jihan retrieve the family ring immediately. Another demanded Amara be dismissed from the estate before she embarrassed the family further. Jihan listened quietly, then stood. "I've heard enough." An elder rose from his chair. "You owe this family an explanation." Jihan buttoned his suit jacket. "No." He walked out, leaving the room in stunned silence. Meanwhile, Amara sat alone inside her room staring at the velvet ring box. She still couldn't believe any of it had happened. Every instinct told her to leave. She removed the ring, placed it carefully inside the box, then carried it downstairs. Mrs. Choi looked at the box and smiled sadly. "Trying again?" Amara nodded. "I have to give it back." Mrs. Choi led her toward Jihan's office. She knocked once before quietly stepping aside. Jihan looked up from a stack of documents. Amara placed the velvet box on his desk. "I can't keep this." Jihan closed the file he had been reading. "Yes, you can. It isn't mine. It is now." She shook her head. "I don't understand you." His expression never changed. "You don't have to." He slid the velvet box back across the desk. "I won't take it." Amara stood there for several seconds. She wanted answers. Instead, she left with even more questions. Across the city, Yoon So-ah wasn't finished. Humiliation wasn't something she accepted, especially not in front of Seoul's most powerful families. She hired a private investigation firm. "I want everything. Family, education, work history, friends. If there's a secret, I want to know." Within days, a thick file landed on her desk. She smiled. There has to be something. Hour after hour. She turned every page. University records, employment history, financial statements, volunteer work, medical records. Nothing. No criminal history. No hidden fortune. No powerful relatives. No lies. Only an ordinary young woman trying to rebuild her life. Seo-ah refused to believe it. "No one is that perfect." She ordered the investigation to continue. That same evening, Amara quietly prepared dinner for Madame Kwan. The elderly woman noticed the sadness in her eyes. "You've been thinking about leaving." Amara looked down. "I don't belong here." Madame Kwan smiled gently. "My dear, sometimes people only realize where you belong after they try to push you away." Amara forced a small smile. She wished it were that simple. Unknown to both women, Jihan had paused outside the dining room. He heard every word. But as always, he walked away without saying anything, leaving Amara wondering whether she had imagined the concern she thought she saw in his eyes. Far behind them, Yoon So-ah watched from the upper balcony. A slow smile crossed her face. If she couldn't prove Amara was a fraud, she would simply create one. And this time, she intended to make sure Kwon Ji-han had no choice but to let Amara go. 3 nights later, the Kwan family hosted its annual Heritage Foundation Gala. Unlike the banquet, this event wasn't private. Government officials, international investors, museum directors, business leaders, every influential figure in Seoul attended. It was the perfect place to restore the Kwan family's reputation, or destroy it forever. Amara had no intention of attending. After everything that had happened, she planned to quietly resign and return to London. But Madame Kwan made one final request. "Come with me, for one last evening." Unable to refuse, Amara agreed. She wore a simple ivory evening gown. Elegant, graceful, nothing designed to attract attention. The Kwan family ring still rested inside its velvet box. She hadn't worn it since the banquet. Across the ballroom, Yoon So-ah smiled to herself. Tonight, everything would end. Earlier that afternoon, one of her men had secretly placed Madame Kwan's priceless jade family seal inside Amara's handbag. The seal had belonged to the Kwan family for generations. Its disappearance would be treated as theft, and once it was discovered, No explanation would save Amara. The gala began peacefully. Jihan stood beside government officials discussing the foundation's latest charitable projects. Amara remained near Madame Kwan. Everything appeared normal, until the lights briefly dimmed for the evening presentation. When they returned, Seoa stepped forward. Chairman Kwan, I'm afraid something has been stolen. The ballroom fell silent. What do you mean? The Kwan family seal. It's gone. Guests exchanged nervous glances. The family elders immediately ordered security to seal every entrance. No one would leave. Seo-ah slowly looked around the ballroom. Then, she pointed directly at Amara. I believe we should begin there. Every eye turned toward her. Amara's face drained of color. I didn't take anything. Soa smiled politely. Then you won't mind if security checks your handbag. The ballroom became painfully quiet. Mrs. Choi looked horrified. Madame Kwan slowly stood. Before she could speak, Amara quietly handed her bag to security. I have nothing to hide. The guard opened it. Seconds later, he froze. Carefully, he lifted out an ancient jade seal wrapped in silk. Gasps echoed throughout the ballroom. The family elders stared in disbelief. Someone whispered, I knew she was after the family. Amara couldn't breathe. I've never seen that before. No one answered. Even Madame Kwan looked stunned. Across the room, Soa lowered her eyes to hide her smile. Everything had gone exactly as planned. Only one person remained completely calm, Kwan Ji-han. He slowly set down his glass, adjusted the sleeve of his jacket, then walked toward the center of the ballroom. He stopped beside Amara, looked at the jade seal, then looked at the security chief. Is everyone finished? The question confused the room. Jihan turned toward the family elders. You've all reached your conclusions? No one spoke. Finally, he nodded once. Good. He looked toward the massive screen behind the stage. Play it. The ballroom lights dimmed. Security footage appeared, recorded just 3 hours earlier. The video showed Seo-ah's personal assistant entering the guest lounge carrying Amara's handbag. Moments later, the assistant carefully placed the jade seal inside before quietly leaving. The room exploded with shock. Seo-ah's smile vanished. That's impossible. Jihan remained expressionless. I've known about your plan since yesterday. She stared at him. You knew? I've known about every investigator you hired, every rumor you spread, every person you paid. I simply wanted everyone here to see the truth. The ballroom fell silent once again. Jihan looked toward security. Escort Miss Yoon and her assistant from the estate. The guards immediately stepped forward. Seo-ah's composure finally broke. You chose her over your own family? Jihan looked directly at her. No, I chose the truth. Without another word, she was escorted from the ballroom. And no one came to her defense. The family elders stood in complete silence. One by one, they lowered their heads toward Amara. No apology could erase what they had done. Finally, one elderly director spoke the question everyone had carried since the banquet. Sir, why her? The ballroom became silent again. Jihan slowly turned toward Amara, then faced the guests. The night I placed the Kwan family ring on her finger wasn't the night I chose her. Confused whispers spread through the room. I had already chosen her weeks before. He explained that after hearing his grandmother praise her, he quietly began observing Amara whenever he returned to the estate. Not because he trusted her, because he trusted no one. He watched her help elderly staff long after her shift ended. He watched her spend her own money buying medicine for an employee who couldn't afford it. He watched her repair things others threw away. He watched her comfort people she had no obligation to help. Most importantly, he watched her refuse every opportunity to gain favor with the Kwan family. She never knew I was watching. She never asked for recognition. She never expected reward. He looked around the ballroom. Every person I've ever met wanted something from the Kwan name. His eyes found Amara. She wanted nothing. A long silence followed. Then he quietly continued. The night she was humiliated, I didn't put the family ring on her finger because she needed protection. I did it because I refused to let this family lose the only person who reminded me what integrity looked like. Tears filled Amara's eyes. For the first time, she finally understood. The applause began slowly, then spread across the ballroom. Even those who had doubted her now stood in respect. But while everyone celebrated, Amara quietly slipped away. She smiled through her tears. Jihan had finally given her the answer she had searched for. Yet, she still needed time to believe she truly belonged. Outside, the cool evening breeze drifted through the estate gardens. Rows of elegant lanterns reflected across the still water of the Quan reflecting garden. The music from the gala echoed faintly behind her. For the first time, she wasn't crying because she had been rejected. She was crying because she had finally been seen. Footsteps approached. She didn't turn. "I thought I'd find you here." Jihan's voice was gentle. He stopped beside her. Neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was peaceful. After a while, Amara reached into her evening bag. She carefully removed the velvet box. Inside, the Quan family ring rested exactly as Madame Quan had given it to her. She looked at it for a long moment, then closed the box and held it out to Jihan. He frowned. "You don't want it?" She smiled softly. "I don't need it anymore." He looked at her quietly. "When I first wore this ring, I thought it was the only reason people respected me. But tonight, they finally saw me. Not because of your family's name, not because of this ring. They saw me because of who I am." She gently placed the velvet box into his hands. "So let it remain what it has always been. A family heirloom. I've already found something far more valuable." Jihan's voice was almost a whisper. "And what's that?" She looked directly into his eyes. "You." For the first time, the unshakable chairman of the Quan Group had no words. A quiet laugh escaped Amara. "I think that's the first time I've ever left you speechless." A genuine smile spread across his face. "It won't be the last." She stepped closer. "So, what happens now?" Jihan looked toward the glowing mansion, then back at her. "Tomorrow. The newspapers will write about tonight. The board will hold meetings. The family will argue. The world will keep moving." He reached for her hand. "But none of that matters as much as one question." Amara tilted her head. "Which is?" He gently intertwined his fingers with hers. "Will you have breakfast with me tomorrow?" She blinked, then laughed through happy tears. "That's your grand romantic speech?" He smiled. "No. It's our first ordinary day." For a long moment, the world became wonderfully simple. No billion-dollar empire. No expectations. No family politics. Just two people, standing beneath the warm glow of lanterns, watching gentle ripples dance across the reflecting water, choosing to discover what life looked like together. Behind the tall windows of the mansion, Madame Quan quietly watched them. Mrs. Choi smiled. "Should we tell them everyone's waiting?" Madame Quan softly shook her head. "They've spent enough of their lives living for everyone else. Tonight, they can simply live for themselves." The music from the ballroom floated across the garden. Neither of them hurried back inside. Neither wanted to let go. Sometimes, love doesn't begin with a proposal. It begins with two people choosing each other. One quiet morning, one ordinary conversation, one shared tomorrow at a time. And for the first time, neither of them needed a family ring to know exactly where they belonged. The end.